I'm standing at the altar in my ivory dress, bouquet trembling in my hands, when the whispers start rippling through the pews. My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a senior client strategist at a private investment firm in Chicago. I've been financially independent since my early 20s, building my career brick by brick. I paid for half of this wedding myself. The flowers, the venue, the photographer capturing this exact moment. I wasn't marrying for security or status. I was marrying for love. That's why when the church doors stay closed and my fiancé, Kyle Brennan, never appears, the world tilts sideways. The officiant shifts uncomfortably. My maid of honor, Jess, squeezes my hand. Then someone pushes through the crowd and hands me Kyle's phone. The screen glows with a message I was never supposed to read. And in that instant, everything I thought I knew shattered. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation going. The text was short, brutal, final. I can't do this. I'm sorry. No explanation beyond those 6 words. No apology that meant anything. Just a coward's exit typed into a glowing screen. I stared at the message while 200 guests watched me unravel in real time. My hands shook so badly the phone nearly slipped from my fingers. Jess grabbed my elbow, whispering urgently, "Lauren, we can leave through the side door." But I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, trying to process how the man who'd promised me forever had just sent a text message instead of showing up. The photographer's camera clicked somewhere to my left. That sound would haunt me for months, the mechanical proof that my humiliation was being documented. My chest tightened. Tears blurred my vision. But I refused to cry in front of everyone. Not yet. Not here. I needed to get out first. I walked back down the aisle alone. Each step felt impossibly heavy, like wading through deep water. My dress, which had felt light and beautiful an hour ago, now dragged behind me like an anchor. Guests stared, some with pity, some with shock, others with barely concealed curiosity. I kept my chin up, eyes fixed on the exit, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Flash bulbs popped. Someone gasped. A child asked loudly, "Where's the groom?" and was quickly shushed. I felt every second of that walk, every whisper, every pitying glance burning into my skin. When I finally reached the church doors and stepped outside into the bright afternoon sunlight, my knees buckled. Jess caught me before I fell. "I've got you," she murmured. But she didn't. Nobody did. Khaled made sure of that. This moment, this single, horrifying moment, would follow me everywhere. He didn't just leave me standing at the altar. He left me with $23,000 in debt from canceled vendors who wouldn't refund deposits. He left me with a story people couldn't stop retelling at parties, in hallways over coffee. Did you hear about Lauren? Left at the altar. Can you imagine? I couldn't escape it. Everywhere I went, I felt people's eyes on me, wondering what was wrong with me that my own fiancé couldn't go through with the wedding. The florist called 3 times demanding payment. The venue manager sent increasingly stern emails. The photographer offered me the wedding photos as a courtesy, which felt more like cruelty. I boxed up the dress, shoved it into the back of my closet, and tried to forget it existed. But Kyle had disappeared completely. No forwarding address, no mutual friends who'd admit to knowing where he went. Just gone. Like our entire relationship had been erased overnight. The weeks after were a blur of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. I stopped answering my phone because every call felt like an interrogation. "Are you okay? What happened? Did you see it coming?" I didn't know how to answer. Was I okay? No. What happened? I had no idea. Did I see it coming? Apparently, I'd been blind. I replayed every conversation, every moment, every sign I might have missed. Had he been unhappy? Had I pushed too hard? Was I too focused on my career? The questions circled endlessly in my mind, eating away at my confidence, my sense of self. I stopped sleeping properly, waking at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat, convinced I'd somehow caused this. My appetite disappeared. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. Jess brought me groceries I didn't eat. My mother called daily, voice thick with worry. I told everyone I was fine. I was lying. 3 months later, a mutual friend, Kyle's college roommate Brian, let the truth slip during a chance encounter at a coffee shop. He looked uncomfortable the moment he saw me, like he wanted to bolt. But I cornered him, desperate for answers. Why did he leave, Brian? Just tell me. He shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. He panicked, Brian finally admitted. He said he wanted more. That settling down felt like you were holding him back from something bigger. The words hit me like a punch. Holding him back? From what? I'd supported every career move, every ambition, every dream he'd mentioned. I'd never asked him to choose between me and anything else. But apparently, my existence had been a cage he needed to escape. Brian mumbled an apology and left quickly, leaving me standing alone with my cold coffee and a revelation that changed everything. That sentence, holding him back, became the turning point. I didn't fall apart again after that conversation. Instead, something hardened inside me. If Kyle thought I was holding him back fine, he was gone. But I wasn't going to let his abandonment define the rest of my life. I moved apartments 2 weeks later, leaving behind the place we'd shared, the memories embedded in every corner. I changed my routines. New gym, new coffee shop, new route to work. I didn't announce the changes to anyone. I just quietly dismantled the life we'd built and started constructing something new, something entirely mine. I stopped checking his social media. Stopped asking mutual friends about him. Stopped caring where he'd gone or what he was doing. It wasn't easy. Some days I backslid, scrolling through old photos, crying in the shower. But slowly, painfully, I started rebuilding. Brick by brick. Decision by decision. I decided I wouldn't stay broken. Not for him. Not for anyone. I threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised even me. I arrived early, stayed late, volunteered for projects nobody else wanted. My boss, Stephanie Flores, noticed immediately. "You're on fire lately," she commented during a quarterly review. I shrugged, deflecting. Just focused. But it was more than focus, it was survival. Work became my sanctuary, the one place where my value was measurable and my worth wasn't tied to someone else's opinion. I closed 3 major deals in 4 months, bringing in new clients and exceeding every target, Stephanie said. My colleagues started treating me differently, not with pity anymore, but with respect. I felt my confidence returning in small, fragile pieces. And then, 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Stephanie called me into her office with news that would change everything. "We're promoting you to Director of Client Relations," she said, smiling. "You've earned it, Lauren." The promotion shifted my world. Suddenly, I was attending high-level meetings, networking events, industry galas, places I'd never had access to before. My income jumped. My responsibilities expanded. And with them came new people, new connections, new possibilities. That's how I met him. His name was Jonathan Whitman, 52 years old, CEO of Whitman Capital Group, one of the most respected investment firms in the Midwest. We met at a fundraiser for childhood literacy, both standing awkwardly near the dessert table, avoiding small talk. He was tall, silver-haired, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. I laughed to spite myself. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who feels the same way," he replied. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. Books, travel, the absurdity of corporate fundraisers. When the event ended, he handed me his card. "If you ever want to grab coffee and complain about these events properly, call me." I didn't think I would, but I kept the card. 3 weeks later, I called him. I don't know why, curiosity maybe, or loneliness I wasn't ready to admit. We met for coffee on a Saturday morning at a quiet cafe near the river. Jonathan arrived exactly on time, ordered black coffee, and asked about my week without any agenda behind the question. It felt strange, talking to someone who didn't want anything from me. He didn't flirt, didn't probe into my personal life, didn't try to fix me or rescue me or rush anything. We just talked about work, about Chicago, about the books we were reading. An hour passed like minutes. When we parted, he said simply, I'd like to do this again if you would. I nodded, surprised by how much I meant it. Over the next few months, our coffee meetings became dinners, then walks along the lakefront, then quiet evenings at his place talking until midnight. I didn't call it dating. I wasn't ready for that word. But slowly, carefully, something was growing between us. Jonathan never asked about my past. He seemed content to know me as I was now, driven, guarded, healing in ways I couldn't articulate. 6 months into whatever we were, he finally brought it up. We were sitting on his balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "You don't talk about what happened before we met," he said gently. I stiffened. "There's not much to say." "That's not true," he replied. "But I'll wait until you're ready." That patience unraveled something in me. I told him everything. The wedding, the text message, the debt, the humiliation, the months of self-blame. He listened without interrupting, without offering empty platitudes. When I finished, he simply said, "He was a fool." I laughed, a little watery. "You don't even know him." "I don't need to," Jonathan said firmly. "Anyone who walked away from you is a fool." It was the first time since Kyle left that I felt seen, valued, cherished. Not despite what happened, but including it. Jonathan didn't see me as broken. He saw me as whole. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, my life looked unrecognizable. I'd been promoted again, now overseeing a team of 12 strategists. I'd paid off all the wedding debt and bought my own condo. No shared lease, no compromises, just mine. I was happier, stronger, more certain of myself than I'd ever been with Kyle. Jonathan and I had been together for a year and a half, though we kept our relationship mostly private. He was respectful of my boundaries, never pushing for labels or public declarations. We simply existed together, comfortably, honestly. Then one evening, he mentioned a corporate gala his company was hosting. "It's mostly boring speeches and overpriced wine," he said, "but I'd like you there." With me. I hesitated. Public events meant questions, speculation, attention. But when I looked at Jonathan, steady, patient, kind, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. "I'd love to go," I said. I had no idea Kyle would be there. The gala was black tie, held at one of Chicago's historic hotels. I almost didn't go. Standing in front of my mirror that evening, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My dress was midnight blue, elegant and understated. My hair was swept up, my makeup subtle. I looked confident, poised, untouchable. Nothing like the trembling bride in white who'd walked down an empty aisle 2 years ago. Jonathan knocked on my door at 7 sharp, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. "You look breathtaking," he said simply. I took his arm, feeling something shift inside me, not nervousness but readiness. Ready to be seen. Ready to move forward. Ready to close a chapter I'd been dragging behind me for too long. The ballroom was already crowded when we arrived, filled with Chicago's business elite. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. A string quartet played softly in the corner. I felt eyes on me the moment we walked in, though I couldn't pinpoint why. Then I saw him. Kyle. Standing across the room, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. His face drained of color. For a moment, we locked eyes across the crowded ballroom, and I watched recognition, shock, and something else, regret, maybe flicker across his features. He looked older, thinner, less confident than I remembered. His suit was slightly too big. His hair was shorter. He was talking to a small group of people, but his attention was entirely on me. I didn't look away. I held his gaze steadily, feeling Jonathan's reassuring presence beside me. Kyle's eyes shifted to the man on my arm, and I saw the exact moment realization hit. Someone nearby was introducing Jonathan to a colleague, using his full title, Jonathan Whitman, CEO of Whitman Capital Group. Kyle's mouth opened slightly. His expression shifted from shock to something like horror. I didn't know it then, but Kyle worked for Whitman Capital. Had for the past 8 months. Jonathan was his boss. The irony was almost too perfect. Kyle started walking toward us, hesitant, unsure. He wove through clusters of guests, his eyes never leaving my face. I felt my heart rate spike, but I kept my expression neutral. Jonathan noticed the approaching man and glanced at me questioningly. I gave a tiny shake of my head. I'll handle this. Kyle stopped a few feet away, hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. Lauren, he said, voice cracking slightly. Hi. Kyle, I replied evenly. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. He looked at Jonathan, then back at me, clearly trying to piece together how I'd ended up here. You look amazing, Kyle finally said. Really amazing. Thank you, I said simply. He shifted his weight. I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't know you. He trailed off, glancing again at Jonathan. Knew each other? I supplied. He nodded. We've been together for over a year, I said calmly. Kyle's face crumpled slightly. Oh. Kyle tried to smile, that familiar charming smile that used to make my stomach flip. Now it just looked desperate. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Privately. Jonathan's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on my waist, but he said nothing, leaving the decision to me. I considered refusing. Considered walking away without giving Kyle the closure he clearly wanted. But part of me needed this conversation too. Needed to look him in the eye and finally let go. 5 minutes, I said. Jonathan nodded, understanding, and stepped away to talk with a colleague. Kyle led me to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the crowd. Once we were alone, he exhaled shakily. I owe you an apology, he began. A real one. Not a text message. I crossed my arms waiting. I panicked, he continued. The morning of the wedding, I convinced myself I was making a mistake. That I wasn't ready. That you deserved better. So you left me at the altar? I asked, voice sharper than I intended. You couldn't have had this crisis a week earlier? A month? You waited until I was standing there in front of everyone. He flinched. I know it was cruel. I think about it all the time, Lauren. About you. About what I threw away. You think about me? I repeated slowly. He nodded eagerly, like this was progress. Every day. I made the biggest mistake of my life. When I saw you tonight with him. He gestured vaguely toward where Jonathan stood. I realized what I lost. I stared at Kyle, searching for the anger I'd carried for so long. It wasn't there anymore. Just a strange, detached clarity. You didn't lose me that day, Kyle, I said quietly. You gave me back to myself. He blinked, confused. I continued, feeling the words solidify as I spoke them. You were right about one thing. I deserved better. Better than a man who'd abandoned me instead of talking to me. Better than someone who saw my love as a cage. You did me a favor, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. Kyle's expression crumbled. Lauren, please. Can't we? No, I said firmly. We can't. I'm happy now. Truly happy. And you don't get to walk back into my life because you have regrets. Behind Kyle, I saw Jonathan watching us from across the room, his expression calm but protective. Is it serious? Kyle asked, following my gaze. With him? Yes, I said simply. Very. Kyle swallowed hard. How did you even meet him? How did you end up here with my boss? There was an edge to his voice now, something ugly creeping in. Jealousy maybe. Or wounded pride. I earned it, I replied. I built my career. I worked harder than I ever had before. I met Jonathan through work, through showing up and being good at what I do. None of it had anything to do with you. He laughed bitterly. So you're with him because he's powerful? Successful? The accusation stung, but I didn't rise to it. I'm with him because he treats me with respect. Because he values my mind, my work, my opinions. Because he never once made me feel like I was holding him back from something better. Kyle's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, Jonathan appeared beside me, his presence quiet but undeniable. Is everything all right? He asked, looking at me, not Kyle. I smiled up at him. Yes. We're finished here. Jonathan nodded, then extended his hand to Kyle with perfect professional courtesy. Kyle, isn't it? Good to see you this evening. Enjoy the event. Kyle shook his hand mechanically, his face pale. As Jonathan and I walked away, I felt Kyle's eyes boring into my back. But I didn't look back. Not once. Whispers followed us through the ballroom. I caught fragments of conversations, People piecing together the story. The CEO's mystery date, the junior analyst who'd approached her, the obvious tension. But the whispers weren't pitying anymore. They were curious, impressed even. Someone murmured, "That's Lauren Hayes. She's brilliant." Another voice replied, "I heard she closed the Riverside deal single-handedly." For the first time in 2 years, the narrative wasn't about the bride who got left behind. It was about the woman who'd rebuilt herself stronger. Jonathan introduced me to colleagues and clients throughout the evening, his hand never leaving the small of my back. I spoke confidently about my work, fielded questions about industry trends, laughed at appropriate moments. I belonged here, not because of Jonathan, but because I'd earned it. Across the room, Kyle stood alone, nursing a drink, watching. He left early. I noticed his absence without caring. The power had shifted completely, and we both knew it. In the car ride home, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for 2 years. The city lights blurred past the window as Jonathan's driver navigated the quiet streets. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline still coursing through my system. Jonathan reached over and took my hand gently. "That was him, wasn't it?" he asked quietly. "The one from the wedding." I nodded. He wanted to apologize. Said leaving me was the biggest mistake of his life. "What did you say?" Jonathan asked. I turned to look at him, this patient, kind man who'd helped me remember my worth without ever demanding I forget my past. I told him the truth, that he didn't lose me. He gave me back to myself. Jonathan smiled, something warm and proud in his expression. "How do you feel?" That question unlocked something. I'd spent 2 years convinced I needed to feel rage, needed to want revenge, needed to prove something to Kyle. But sitting in that car, Jonathan's hand warm in mine, I realized I didn't feel any of those things. "Free," I said finally. "I feel finished." Jonathan squeezed my hand. "Good. You deserve to be free." The days following the gala brought unexpected aftershocks. Kyle sent me an email, long, rambling, full of regrets and what-ifs. I deleted it without reading past the first paragraph. He tried calling twice. I blocked his number. He even reached out to Jess, asking her to put in a good word. She laughed and told him to move on. I heard through office gossip that Kyle had requested a transfer to Whitman Capital's New York office. The request was denied. He'd have to face me, or at least the idea of me, every day at work, knowing I was with his boss, knowing he'd thrown away something real for a panic attack and cold feet. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd made his choices. Now he'd live with them. Meanwhile, my life continued its upward trajectory. I landed another major client. Stephanie started talking about partnership track. Jonathan and I started discussing moving in together, taking the next step without fear or hesitation. Everything Kyle thought I'd been, a cage, a limitation, a compromise, I'd proven wrong simply by thriving without him. 6 months after the gala, Jonathan asked me to marry him. We were at his lake house, sitting on the dock watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink. There was no grand gesture, no public spectacle. Just Jonathan, looking at me with absolute certainty, saying, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation. Not because I'd forgotten the altar where I once stood alone, but because I'd finally healed from it. This time, I wasn't marrying to complete myself or prove my worth. I was marrying because I'd found someone who saw me clearly, all my scars, all my strength, and loved me not despite them, but including them. We planned a small ceremony. Just close friends and family. No massive guest list, no expensive venue, no room for disaster. Jess cried when I told her. "You deserve this," she said fiercely. "You deserve everything." And for the first time, I believed her. I did deserve this. Not because I'd suffered, but because I'd survived and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The wedding was perfect. Intimate, genuine, full of people who'd stood by me during the worst moments and celebrated with me during the best. I wore a simple cream dress, carried wildflowers, and walked down an aisle lined with candles toward a man who'd shown up every single day since we met. When Jonathan said, "I do," his voice was steady, certain, unwavering. When I said it back, I meant it with every fiber of my being. There were no text messages, no cold feet, No abandoned altars. Just two people choosing each other completely. At the reception, Jess pulled me aside. Kyle would die if he could see this, she said with a wicked grin. I shook my head. I don't care what Kyle thinks anymore. This has nothing to do with him. And I meant it. My happiness wasn't revenge. It wasn't proof. It was just happiness. Simple, hard-won, entirely mine. I danced with Jonathan under string lights, laughed with friends, toasted to futures instead of dwelling on pasts. And when the night ended, I went home with my husband, finally, completely free. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Jonathan and I merged our lives seamlessly. His home became our home, his routines accommodated mine, our careers supported each other. I made partner at my firm 8 months after the wedding. Jonathan's company expanded into 3 new markets. We traveled, hosted dinner parties, built a life that felt solid and real. Occasionally, I'd think about Kyle. Wonder if he'd moved on, if he'd found happiness, if he'd learned anything from what happened. But the thoughts were fleeting, detached, no longer painful. He'd become a character in a story I once lived, not a wound that still bled. One afternoon, cleaning out old files, I found the box with my first wedding dress still shoved in the back of a storage closet. For a moment, I considered opening it, confronting that ghost one final time. But I didn't. Instead, I donated it to a charity that repurposed wedding dresses for bereaved parents making burial gowns. Someone else's tragedy could be softened by the fabric of mine. It felt like the right kind of closure, transforming pain into something that might ease someone else's. 3 years after Kyle left me at the altar, I ran into Brian, his old college roommate, at a conference. He looked uncomfortable the moment he saw me, just like he had at that coffee shop years ago. But this time, I wasn't desperate for answers. Lauren, he said hesitantly. Hey, you look great. Thanks, Brian. How are you? We made polite small talk for a few minutes before he finally asked, Did you hear about Kyle? I shook my head. He's engaged, Brian said carefully, watching my reaction. To someone he met in New York. They're getting married next spring. I waited for the pain, the jealousy, the old wounds to reopen. They didn't. I hope he's happy, I said honestly. I hope he shows up this time. Brian laughed, surprised. You're not angry? No, I realized as I said it. I'm grateful. If he'd shown up that day, I'd have married the wrong person for the wrong reasons. I wouldn't have the life I have now. Brian nodded slowly. You really did land on your feet. No, I corrected gently. I picked myself up and built something better. There's a difference. I'm sitting in my office now, looking out over the Chicago skyline, thinking about the woman I was 3 years ago. The one shaking at the altar, holding a bouquet that would never be tossed, wearing a dress that would never be danced in. I don't hate her. I don't pity her either. I understand her now. Her hope, her trust, her belief that love would be enough. She wasn't wrong to believe those things. She was just believing them with the wrong person. Kyle didn't leave me at the altar. Not really. He released me. Freed me to discover who I was without him, what I was capable of building alone. And 2 years later, when he saw me on Jonathan's arm at that gala, he finally understood what he'd walked away from. Not the woman he knew, the woman I became. People ask sometimes if I ever got closure. I smile and say yes. Because closure isn't a conversation or an apology. It's waking up one day and realizing the story that once defined you no longer has power. It's choosing happiness not as revenge, but as healing. It's understanding that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to everything you were meant to be. I wasn't left at the altar. I was released. And 2 years later, he finally saw what he walked away from, on someone else's arm, wearing a smile that had nothing to do with him anymore.